Have you ever wondered why love and relationships are just so hard sometimes? See, I used to wonder the same thing myself. And that's why I created for you our free attachment style quiz today. It allows you to pinpoint your own subconscious beliefs that drive your patterns so you can know exactly why some of these things are challenging and get an entirely free report that then tells you how you can start your journey and what to do next. If you take 2 minutes or less to really discover your attachment style using the link in the show notes below, you can start finally making sense of relationships, have things go a lot more smoothly in the future, and be supported by different tools that can help you in your journey going forward.
What are your deal breakers, such as like, I won't date a smoker? If someone does or doesn't want kids, does someone want to get married versus not want to get married? Do you want someone of the same religion? And if you're not sure where someone stands on non-negotiables, you have to ask them.
The non-negotiables are maybe these really important personal views you have about something. Things that I like to think of standards as are like the things that are really important to you, but you would be able to budge on a couple of them. It's more like characteristics and qualities you're looking for in a person, but that aren't necessarily deal breakers. I want to date somebody who likes to travel as much as I do, or somebody who's ambitious.
Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to another episode of our podcast. I'm here today with our co-host, Mike DiZio. And in today's video, we are going to do a deep dive into 10 major questions that you definitely want to ask yourself and somebody you might be interested in getting into a relationship with before making a commitment. And my hope is that by understanding and asking these questions, you will not only avoid dating the wrong people and wasting your own time, but you'll also develop this deep sense of clarity for what to actually vet for when you're meeting people, what to look for, what's important to you, and just feeling like you are dating intentionally. And I've often said to people that, if you're going on a job hunt and you're trying to look for a new job, you definitely don't want to just get on Indeed and apply to the first 10 jobs that you see, like in order, right? Like, oh, a welder, oh, a bartender, oh, like you want to go in being like, what kind of job do I want to work in? And what are the characteristics of that job? What's the corporate culture like there? The more you know ahead of time, the more successful you're going to be at finding something that truly fits for you, that resonates. And that's no different when it comes to dating. So, Mike, I'm going to let you kick it off from here, but we're going to talk about it. And for anybody who doesn't know this already, I used to be a fearful avoidant attachment style. Mike used to be a dismissive avoidant. We've both done the work to become secure. So we often talk a lot on this podcast just about the different perspectives of attachment styles and what it's like to do the work to become secure and just some of that journey. So we'll definitely share that here with you today.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what you said, the job analogy is such a good one. A lot of people go into the job and they're almost like really anxious of like, I have to impress them. I have to show up as amazing. Like it's all about them impressing the other person. But it's like, you need to ask them questions to see if you're a good fit, if they're a good fit for you. Because you're going to be working there, you're going to be spending, 40 plus hours a week in that place. You want to make sure, is this the right fit for me? Otherwise, you're just going to go in somewhere, probably waste like months and months and months, potentially years, and you might not be a good fit. You might not be happy. So same idea, a little different. But what we have today is like 5 things you really want to focus on asking yourself. Am I ready? Do I have my non-negotiables? Am I emotionally ready? Then we have 5 questions that you can ask the other person to gauge their level of readiness. Because again, you don't want to go into something completely not sure and just be like, okay, let's throw spaghetti at the wall and hopefully it sticks and see what happens. Like you want to be intentional and know, okay, like, does this have a really good chance of working out together?
Yeah. And just to give context, like per attachment style, I mean, that's generally what you'll see. Like anxious attachment styles will often just meet somebody and be like, oh, I have fun with them and I think that they're attractive or I feel attracted to them. So I'm just going to date them. And it's like, wait, that's not like what's going to get you long-term success. That's like saying, oh, cool, the job is in my area and it's open. So let me go apply to that job. It's like, do you like that job? Do you like that career? Do you have prior experience? You have to be a lot more clear. But on the flip side, we often see like more dismissive avoidance being like flaw finding, being overly critical, a little too hypervigilant about like incompatibilities and flaws or differences and putting too much emphasis on that. And that's not good either. So you often see, and then fearful avoidance will kind of oscillate back and forth. So rather than falling into one of these autopilot traps where if you're an anxious attachment style, you're just people pleasing your way from dating situation to dating situation, or if you are a dismissive avoidant, you're flaw finding and sort of sabotaging, rather than doing some of these things on autopilot, being aware of them, being able to get to the bottom of these questions more intentionally ahead of time, all of these things will help tremendously. So we're going to dive in if you want to start with the very first one.
Okay, so question one you want to ask yourself is, what are my non-negotiables? This one's huge. I know for sure upfront, beforehand. What are your deal breakers, such as like, I won't date a smoker. If someone does or doesn't want kids, does someone want to get married versus not want to get married? Do you want someone of the same religion of your own to be compatible that way? So if you're not sure where someone stands on non-negotiables, you have to ask them. Probably not something, you want to ask on day one. Maybe it comes up in conversation, but it's something as you're getting to know someone, you have to have your list of non-negotiables and then eventually start to figure out, okay, does this person want the things that I want? Do they want the things that completely I know I want in my heart, that I've always wanted? Like, you're not just going to let someone come along and take you away from something that you know inherently that you really want really badly. That's just like breeding grounds for resentment. That's like going to be pain down the road. And it's also, you're going to get attached to someone. And then, 4 or 5 years down the road, when you're like, let's say you want to have kids, but they told you early on, like, hey, I don't really want kids. But maybe you were thinking, oh, like, I'm sure they'll warm up to the idea, or, I'm sure they'll change their mind. But really, like, a non-negotiable, you have to be like full stop when those things come up. Because like I said, if you don't mention that right away and you don't honor your non-negotiables, it can be a lot of kind of heartache down the road. So that would be number one.
Yeah. And to give context for this, like, sometimes you hear this if you're listening and you're like, yeah, obviously, like, I'm not going to date somebody who doesn't want kids if I really want kids. Or obviously I'm, if I'm a non-smoker and or I'm a vegan or whatever it is, you think that. But like, a lot of times people truly, like, I can't tell you how many times I saw clients in my practice when I was running it that were like, yeah, they told me they didn't want kids, but I just thought that they would change. It happens all the time. So making sure you're really honoring that. And then just to give context about non-negotiables too, like, they are going to be different for everybody. So one person's non-negotiable is not going to be another's. So I use an example that, like, I had a client at one point and she, her mother died of lung cancer. And so for her, like, dating a smoker was non-negotiable. A, because she was like, oh, this runs in my family, and she was concerned about it. And B, it was like such a deep thing for her. She didn't want to lose somebody like that again. And so that was huge for her. That may not be somebody else's. Somebody might be a smoker and be like, okay, fine. Or one person's vegan and the other person's a meat eater. And they like, it's going to be really individual, but really your non-negotiables are like your deal breakers in relationships, the things that like 100% you are not going to be okay if they happen. And if you do invest in somebody who does have those non-negotiables, it's actually a deep form of self-betrayal, because you're dishonoring and betraying the things that are important to you. And so by being in a relationship with that person, you're actually being unfair and unhealthy to yourself.
Right. Do you think some of those things can kind of shift? So like, for example, let's say you're like, oh, I'm not a relationship kind of person. Yeah, I don't ever want to get married. But then a couple years down the road, you're like, I really love this person and I can't see myself without them for the rest of my life. Is that something you could warm up to, do you think? Or still, like, if you don't want to get married and that's like a hard no, you have to honor that and walk away if that's your stance.
So to answer your question, it's not what I want to tell people, but to answer your question, yes, people can change. Okay. I do see it, but more often than not, they won't. So unless somebody is like actively doing something to work on themselves. So for example, if somebody tells you, I never want to get married, and you're sitting here like starting your dating process and you're like, I do want to get married. If that person's like doing active things, they're working on themselves, they're saying, I don't want to get married, but they're working through their childhood wounds and fears and traumas. And you're like, oh, hey, that's probably part of why they don't want to get married, is they saw a lot of painful things in a marriage with their parents, or, things like that. Okay. Those could be indicators that somebody may change. But if somebody's not doing the work on certain things, they're much less likely to change. So to answer your question, yes, but don't bet on that, please. If you're listening and you're trying to date somebody and you're putting yourself out there, like, more often than not, somebody won't. So if somebody tells you, I don't want kids, I don't want to get married, I don't want this, that, or the other. If somebody tells you that, you do have to go with it. And if you do fall into the trap, I really think it's a trap, because I saw far too many people get hurt by this. I'd see people be like, oh, I thought they would change. I thought they would change their mind. I thought if they liked me enough or if I was a good enough partner, then they would change. And it's just a trap the vast majority of the time. You're far better off like honoring your non-negotiables early on, hearing somebody say that, and if it's a non-negotiable, exiting that on date 3 or 4 and not continuing, then developing feelings, being 5 years in, still hoping that the person's going to change and then not really knowing how it's going to go down and being in a very high likelihood of betraying yourself. So yes, people can change. It's usually more of the exception than the rule. So you still want to bet as if like, these are my non-negotiables. I have to show up for them.
Definitely. I know actually 2 firsthand experiences of people that I know who were in like 8 to 10 year relationships where their partner said in the beginning, hey, like to let you know, I don't want kids. And I guess their partner thought, oh, they might come around eventually. But then, 8 or 10 years later, they're like, hey, like, I really, really want to have kids. And the person's kind of like, hey, like, I told you, I don't want to have kids. So to me, that signals, okay, in the beginning, they didn't honor their non-negotiable, which is okay. Like we've all been there, but there was no conversation, sort of check-in conversations to like still see where someone's at. You know what I mean? There was no like temperature check to be like, hey, we've been together for a couple of years now. I know you said you didn't want kids at all. Like, would you be starting to open to that a little bit? Like even a possibility? And I think if they would have had that conversation, they probably would have found out like the person's like hard, like no. And then you have to make the decision to walk away.
Totally.
So, anyway,
I love that. I think that's such an important piece is like that temperature check. And we talk about this a lot in like PDS when somebody's not sure if they want to stay or leave a relationship. And hopefully you don't get to this. Don't use this as an excuse to be like, oh, somebody has my non-negotiables. Let me just go with it and then do temperature checks. Like I don't want to say that either. But if you are already in this situation and you're like, oh, geez, I've been dating somebody for 2.5 years or 4 years and I love them. And I realized I had this non-negotiable. I realized we're kind of like shoving it under the rug. Have those conversations. And if somebody is like, I'm not going to change my mind, then it's time to move in a different direction if it's a non-negotiable. If somebody's like, I'm not sure, set a deadline. If they're like, let me let you know in a year, or have that conversation. Okay, listen, I'm going to need an answer within that next year or that next 6 months. Like, have a think about it. I'll give you some time and space. I know that it's a big ask because I know from the beginning you said you didn't want to go in this direction, but let's come to that decision together so we can see. And if you're in that situation already, then that can be an approach to take. So I love that you shared that.
For sure. And just to wrap it up, like just have your non-negotiables. A lot of people just don't even really have them on their radar. So just coming to the table and having them sort of knowing what your non-negotiables are like super, super helpful.
Before you move on, can we just do a touch base on giving some examples? So like some examples for me, right? Like you have the obvious, like no abuse in relationships. But like other things would be non-negotiables could be like somebody who doesn't have, who hasn't cheated in every relationship could be a non-negotiable. Somebody who you look at dynamics and you're like, for me, if I were dating again, I would be like a non-negotiable is somebody's willing to address a conflict, like not sweep it under the rug, like address it head on, move through it in a healthy way. They're willing to communicate. They are always willing to grow, whether that's in, their career, whether that's personally, like whatever, that growth is a priority to them. Because these are big things to me. So these could be examples. Everybody's are going to be different, but I just wanted to share some. I don't know if you want to share some as well that are more personal to you, but that way we're just giving examples on that one too.
Yeah, for me, if someone's like a really big drinker, that's kind of full stop for me. Like, if they're social drinkers or you go to a function or a party, have a couple of drinks. But if it's somebody who's like getting drunk often or whatever, and again, not to judge, like I've been through stages where I used to go crazy, but I'm at this stage in my life now, and I know for the rest of my life, I really value my health and mental health and things like that. I just take really good care of that. So if somebody's sort of out there getting wasted and partying, like for sure, that's just not going to match with my lifestyle at this point in time. So that'll be a deal breaker. Another one will probably be like where we stand on like medical values and like ideas. Because the idea is if we had a kid together, if you're on one side and this person's on the other side for like important medical issues, that's going to be just an absolute like disaster. And again, I know of a few situations where that situation came up and they didn't have the conversation about sort of where they stood on their medical stances. Sometimes you just think, oh, everybody's kind of the same and, we're going to have the same stances. But I think especially in the last like 5 years, you have a lot of polarizing opinions and thoughts on this kind of stuff. So for me, that I would need my partner to sort of at least be in the area of mine, it can be flexible on some things, but there's some things that I won't waver on. So I think medical opinion or whatnot would be a deal breaker.
Yeah, and I think that raises like some of those things are so important just in terms of, I thought you were going to say something else. I was laughing. I thought you were going to tell a funny story, but I think it's really important in terms of like, just ironing out like things that are meaningful to you, really important to you, things that you really stand behind, like whatever those things are, just being clear about them. And it doesn't, you have to like then demonize somebody with a different opinion or a different, feeling about something. It just means being really clear about like, okay, these are the things that are important to me. That's what I want to prioritize, and then being able to go from there. So great examples, really good stuff. And hopefully that really covers that first one. Do you want to jump into the next one?
For sure. Next, you want to know what are my standards. So this is kind of like, you could say, I guess, below non-negotiables. It's more so like, do you want somebody that's really ambitious in their career? Do you want someone who's emotionally supportive, like maybe like a really good listener? Again, these things might not be deal breakers, but they still have a lot of impact and they still sort of hold a lot of weight. So again, you want to identify like, what are your standards? What's your kind of wish list of the type of person that you want to sort of spend your time and energy with? And again, they're not things where it's like, okay, this person is not the most like, not like a 10 out of 10 emotionally literate, but I can see, they try and they're actually like not too bad and can, hold space for me if I going through something. So it's things again like that you would like and you prefer, but it doesn't have to be like, okay, I need this list of 20 things, and if the person doesn't have all 20, I'm out of here. Yeah. So it's more so standards and preferences. You can almost rate them as preferences.
So, in terms of standards, some things that I like to think of standards as are like the things that are really important to you, but you would be able to budge on a couple of them. So let's say you're like, okay, the non-negotiables are maybe these, really important personal views you have about something, some of the things we were just talking about, but standards would be like, oh, I want to date somebody who likes to travel as much as I do, or somebody who's ambitious, or somebody, it's more like characteristics and qualities you're looking for in a person, but that aren't necessarily deal breakers. So if you get somebody who you like really connect with on so many things, there's no non-negotiables there at all. But then maybe they have all these amazing qualities, but they don't like to travel and you love to travel. That could be something that's like a standard. You might compromise on one or two of those, right? You might be okay with, hey, maybe eventually we'll compromise and we'll decide to take one trip a year together or whatever it is. But things that are not non-negotiables, but a way of being intentional. And to dive in here for just a second, what I often tell people, because sometimes people hear like non-negotiables and standards. And I remember having a couple of clients at one point who were like, Thais, I went on a date and I had talked to them about non-negotiables and standards. And they were like, I asked them all the non-negotiables and standards on the first date. And you'd be so proud of me. And I was like, no, that's not the path. You don't want to turn dating into like a job interview. It's really about like figuring out the non-negotiables first, making sure you're aligned so you don't waste your own time or start developing feelings for somebody where it will never work long-term anyways. And then from there, you ask like one or maybe two questions as it pertains to your standards each date. So that way you're not like job interviewing somebody, but maybe if you're a big traveler, you say to the person on a date, hey, what do you feel about traveling? Do you enjoy traveling? Or maybe you say on another date, you're like, oh, are you somebody who would characterize yourself as being ambitious? Are you constantly looking to grow into the next challenge? So you're speaking about those things without it being like, are you ambitious? Do you like to travel? Do you smoke? You don't want it to become this job interview process. So one or two questions per date, usually starting with your non-negotiables, allows you to get a better feel for where somebody's at and be more intentional around how you're connecting with them.
Exactly. You don't want to fall into the trap where sorry, there's a bird flying into my window over and over. Wants my attention. So you don't want to fall into the trap where you need someone to be like exactly like you. Like, okay, I like to go to the gym. I like to stay home a lot and watch Netflix. I like to do this, that, and the other. And then you're just hoping for like basically a copy and paste of yourself. So like you can do the exact same stuff all the time. This would probably be like, you need someone to have some differences as well to bring like different dynamics into the relationship. You're going to grow way more if you're with someone who's doing like at least a little bit of different things as you. So you want to look at standards as like hopefully things of the same interest. Like I like going to the gym. I like health and fitness. That would be cool if somebody likes to do that stuff as well. But like if they don't like to go to the gym, that's not really the thing. But they'll go for a walk with me. Maybe we go for dinner and then go for a nice walk around the neighborhood after. that's cool as well. So I wouldn't eliminate them just because they didn't want to go to the gym, but at least they're open to like doing a few other things that might be, physically based. But yeah, too many times I remember in the past, I would think like, like we should be exactly the same. And that's just not possible. Like you're not gonna like you can clone yourself and hopefully find a partner that way. I don't think that'll work too well. But you also don't want to discount yourself. So if I'm on a date, I used to get really scared if somebody's like, oh yeah, I love doing extreme sports, or I like to, I don't know, travel to like foreign locations that are really like off the grid. In the past, I might have been really scared about that, but you could slowly expose yourself to new things, and you don't have to do exactly what that person's doing. So if that person likes skydiving, like if you're like, no, like I'm afraid of heights, that's okay. Like you shouldn't be eliminated. You shouldn't be worried that you're not going to be good enough for that person, because remember, you're bringing so many like good things to the table. If somebody were to walk away from you just because you didn't like to, again, like skydiving or like do the exact same hobby that they like to do, like don't discount yourself, because there's people out there just waiting for someone like you, and then we discount ourselves before the other person's even discounted us, if that makes sense.
I love that you said that. I want to say on top of that, that was such an important point. A lot of people think dating means like, okay, finding like you just said, like this carbon copy. I have never seen a long-term relationship last where people are like just carbon copies of each other. And even if it starts by
Yeah.
seeming that way, like, oh, we're so alike, we have so many things in common. Usually when the power struggle stage hits, like once you're in a longer term relationship and you start to know each other more and know each other's like fears and inner worlds better, usually you'll be surprised at how many differences there are. And I'm a big believer that relationships are just as much about love as they also are about like an opportunity for growth. And we learn through people and we take on certain things of theirs, and they help us grow in new directions. Like maybe you're somebody who struggles with boundaries and you're with somebody who's really good at boundaries, and you learn like, oh wow, they know how to set boundaries in these ways. And eventually you take some of that on. Like there's so much richness in getting to know somebody, being okay with differences, learning to navigate them, and taking on some of those things from somebody else. It really grows you as a person. And so I've rarely seen people who are so similar end up in really long-lasting relationships together. It's beautiful to have similarities. It's obviously important around key things, but it's also completely okay and maybe equally important to have differences. So I'm really glad you said that. I think that's such an important piece to just pay attention to. And I love that you said as well, like if you're somebody who's on a date with somebody and you're like, I don't like this thing that they love, maybe they're not going to like me. Don't fall into the trap. Like vet them, see if it's a compatible fit. Don't be afraid of differences. Those can actually be things that are beautiful. And there really is a subconscious attraction that's about having different characteristics, because the subconscious mind wants to attach to those things that are different and feels like it makes a whole from that. So it's actually a subconscious part of attractions where you hear like opposites attract and things like that. So don't be afraid of that.
100%. I actually fairly recently talked to this woman who's been married to her husband for about 40 years. And, of course you asked like, wow, that's amazing. Like what's the secret? She gave me some really good words, but the one that stuck out to me the most was she said, admiration. We both still like admire each other a lot. So she thinks the way that he does things, he was a university professor, and he's just like super smart and super knowledgeable in certain areas that she has no idea about. But she sees his passion for it. She sees that he like can communicate it so well. She sees how other people are interested when he's sharing. And she just like watches him like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. And vice versa. He looks at her at some of the things she can do. She's an amazing cook. She's more spiritual minded, and like he's not totally in that world, but he can still appreciate it. So I just thought it was such a cool thing that to admire your partner. So it's like looking at them and it's like you do and you have these abilities and things that I don't have at all. And I just think that's really beautiful and wonderful. And I'm blessed that I get to be around that. And it's cool. Like if we were the exact same, there's not really much to like admire or like really look at the other person and be like, wow, like this is amazing. You still love them, of course. But point being, I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. And I don't know if maybe admiration is high on my personality needs list. But I just thought when she mentioned that, it just really struck a chord, because I've looked at some partners that I've had and I've thought like, when they can do something skilled or something specific, I'm always like, wow, that's really cool. And I really like encourage them and give them praise for that. So I don't know. I think admiration is like a really cool piece. And I'm sure sometimes you look at Graham when he's doing things like coding or like, he's a computer wizard. I'm sure there's times you're like, wow, like that's pretty freaking cool that you can do that. And like, I have no clue how to do any of that stuff.
I really agree with that. And I think like differences are something that actually connect you like later on into the relationship. Like I really have found things that I appreciate so much about Graham are often things that are very unique to him. Like he's just like so straightforward and to the point and like so direct about stuff. And like I really like that. I'm always like kind of worrying a little too much about people's feelings and like dancing around things. And like if I have to tell somebody bad news, I'm like really mindful and all this stuff. And he'll be like, just tell them straight up, just say it. Like, and there's just like little things that make a big difference that I do admire and I appreciate. And I feel like when you also have different perspectives on things that come from different directions, and as you really get to know each other and like learn to navigate those things really well, what I also find happens is like you get to know each other and then you find like this really great middle ground. There's so many times I go to Graham with something that like maybe I'm not sure how to do, maybe a new skill or something I'm learning or whatever it might be, and be like, should I approach it this way or this way? And I'll think one way and he'll say something totally different. And then I'll be like, wow, that's actually a really good perspective. And it will move like how I see things. It often won't, because I am pretty good in my sense of self. Like I won't change. I won't just become what he says or just do exactly what he says, but it will like take me from like this side to like somewhere in the middle. I'll be like, oh, that was actually really good feedback. Now I can do it this way. And I think it's so healthy to have somebody in a close relationship that you're not super similar to. But Graham and I often talk about this. I'm like way down the rabbit hole now, but Graham and I often talk about this. And we talk about how like the things that really matter, we're very similar on. Like we're both like not really too into like superficial things. We both like really want to work through things if there's an issue. Like this is some really important like cornerstones. The way we live, our lifestyle, the things that, that kind of stuff. But then then we're so different in things that are different, like in terms of our hobbies or like there's so many differences, but it's cool that like kind of creates this way to learn from each other and like balance each other out in a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Another standard thing that's just popped in my head. It might be weird or funny, but like I can't tell you how many people I know that said like I'm a cat person, and then I don't think I could date someone that had a dog, and then they date someone who has a dog, and then you see them like a year later and they're walking the dog and like they become this completely different dog person. Now they pushing the dog in the stroller. Like, especially my one friend, him as well. I won't say his name, but like he was this like macho guy who like never really had pets or animals. And like he started dating this girl and she had this tiny little thing dog that you put in your purse. And, we saw him after like 6 months or so and he's walking this thing and like kissing it and stuff. And we just thought it was the funniest. So like, again, don't have your standards, but like you wouldn't eliminate somebody for something, that you think, oh, there's just no way I could ever love a dog or ever love a cat. Because I've seen people go both ways. Like dog lovers really enjoy a cat now, and then a cat lover enjoying dogs as well. So.
And honestly, a lot of that like is if you find yourself doing that over small things, there's a decent chance that you're flaw finding. Like if you're like, oh, nitpicking like that, there's a chance that it's flaw finding and it's like a subconscious strategy for self-protection. So definitely good to keep in mind if anybody hears themselves in that too. If you are tired of feeling misunderstood, pushing people away as soon as you become afraid, or simply feeling like you're getting hurt over and over again in relationships, trust me, I know how draining it can be. One of the most common things I see is that people repeat the same subconscious relationship patterns over and over again. And that is why we created our membership program at the Personal Development School. And what this really does is allows you to not just get access to one course, but literally every resource we've ever created. In our membership at the Personal Development School, not only do you have courses broken down and recommended to you in order by your attachment style in terms of exactly what you need to do to not just heal, but thrive in relationships, but on top of that, there's all this extra support. There's a daily webinar most of the days of the week with me. So if you feel like you are finally ready to break free and really get secure in relationships, click the link down below. And I can't wait to see you on the other side.
Number 3, you want to ask, what are my morals? So again, it's you want to have that sort of list and things ready ahead of time just to know if you guys are on the same page morally. This could be similar to the last one where we talked about standards. But moral perspectives are like honesty. Is this an honest person? Do you see that they have honesty as a very big virtue that they have? Integrity, trustworthiness, These are sort of things you want to identify beforehand. Are you guys on the same page morally and ethically on certain things? And if you're not, again, you're going to have to make a decision to see, is this the type of person that I want to be with? Is this the type of person I would want to have kids with? Will we be parenting a lot differently if we have different morals? So that's just something to identify as well. You want to ask yourself where we sort of similar on the moral scale.
So many people, I would see this. And if you don't, like some people are like, yeah, whatever. Everybody's probably like pretty moral. I have seen situations where people have dated somebody for a long time, been in a marriage perhaps, and never had moral conversations about like, where do you stand on these things or that kind of thing. And then fast forward however many years, 4 years, 5 years later, somebody does something that was okay for their moral compass, but you assumed that was not their moral compass. And then you feel shocked and betrayed, like, oh, how could they have done that in that situation? You really take it personally. Usually that's because you just never had these upfront conversations to begin with. And this doesn't have to be like a long drawn out thing, but it is something you should get an idea around, because if you don't, usually we all tend to project from our perception. In other words, we all tend to assume that other people will be the way that we are in a situation. And then, God forbid, that's the situation with your children, or that's a situation with how you're going to treat a family member in need, or that's a situation with something like happening out in the world that deeply resonates and affects you. The moment that somebody doesn't respond the way you would expect them to, if you never had the conversation, you're going to feel betrayed because you're probably assuming one thing. But understanding these things a little bit in advance can save you a lot of heartache. And also in the longevity of a relationship, if you end up co-parenting, have kids, all these things in the future, you'll want to have known these things in advance for sure.
Exactly. I don't know why I'm picturing a scenario where like you're out with your partner and you get into a verbal altercation with someone, and then right away they go to like physically assault the other person, where it's like if you were spending time with them before, kind of gauging how they are morally and ethically, you'd see like if there is a problem, you've seen them deal with it, and they deal with it in a very like, hey, let's talk this out, or let's make physical violence the absolute extreme last choice of what I would do in a situation like that. Because again, you're talking about the kids. Then maybe if you didn't know they have this like explosive temper and they're not sort of apt to like talking things out, maybe they're like want to physically harm the kids or like spank the kids, and you're of the mind, you're like, hell no, like we're not using physical violence as like as a discipline tool in the household. But again, if that wasn't a conversation before, you wouldn't know that the person, that's their sort of what they want to do, or that's their proclivity, right? So you definitely want to be on the same page morally. Yeah. All right, number 5, you want to ask yourself, am I emotionally ready? So a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect before entering a relationship, but like you don't have to be perfect at where you're in your life right now, but you do want to ask yourself, am I ready to be vulnerable? Am I ready to have hard conversations when things come up? And they will come up like 100%. Am I ready to start making choices that allow me to consider someone else? Basically, like, am I in a selfish stage right now where I am just looking out for me and my career and, focusing solely on other things? You definitely have to be real and honest with yourself.
Yeah. Am I ready to, like, I love that you said vulnerability, I think is huge. Am I ready to make compromises, right? Am I ready to like, hey, if I'm going to date somebody and be in a committed relationship, I'm not going to just like spend every weekend out all night with my friends. Like I'm going to spend time with that person. Like I think there's a really important discussion, and it's not just that, it's also, am I over my past? Am I in a place where I'm still carrying, a recent breakup, or I'm not over my ex? I mean, these questions, so often we just do dating and relationships so on autopilot. And I would like to think that the more on autopilot we are, the more and I don't mean this in like a mean way, but I just think there's a really strong correlation here. The more likely it is that you're going to end up in some form of heartache. So like, am I ready to invest in somebody? Am I ready to open up? Am I ready to share about my past? Have I made peace with who I am and where I'm at? Am I comfortable making compromises? Am I comfortable having tough conversations? Am I carrying baggage from my past relationship? Am I still stalking my ex every day on Instagram? Like, these things are so important to be able to just come to terms with. And it's not like you have to have a checklist of being like 10 out of 10 perfect and all these things, but you need to be ready to embrace them. Like you may not be like, I'm so vulnerable every day, but maybe you're like, you know what, I've come a bit of a way on that, and I'm ready to embrace vulnerability as I enter into that next season. And so just being ready is important for the things that a relationship will require. Not taking those super lightly if you are somebody who's looking to have success in your dating life, find a really great partner, find yourself in a position where you're in a happy, fulfilling relationship. That's not going to happen by accident. You're not going to fall into that overnight because you just, that you happen to meet the perfect person. That's really rare. It's more about like, are you in a good enough space to handle the growth that sometimes relationships will require? And are you vetting enough to be able to have that from the receiving end? So yeah, love that one. I think that's super important. So should we flip it around to like the next piece here and move into a little bit of the other types of questions that we want to ask the other person, especially as we near a more serious part of that relationship dynamic?
Yeah. So the question number one for the other person, you want to ask like, what does a committed relationship look like to you? So like, yes, we've been dating for a while now in the dating stage, but now if we go towards a formal commitment, what changes do you see happening once things become official? Because sort of like we touched on before, like if they're thinking, oh, like it's just going to be, I'm going to be doing the same thing. Like I'll be going out partying, like hanging out with different girls or hanging with my ex-girlfriend all the time. Like you have to sort of let the person know, like, hey, I'm ready to sort of make accommodations to allow you to be in my life as my primary partner. Basically, you don't want any like surprises. You want to be on the same page. So you want to ask the person to know, like, hey, what does this next step look like to you? Like, how do you see things going, or how do you see things changing? Just because you don't want any surprises or somebody kind of doing whatever they want, when it's like, no, you should have a certain amount of expectation of how the commitment stage should look. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good conversation to have, like when you're talking about commitment, like, hey, are we together? If somebody's asking for a commitment, like say what your heart wants. Like if it's a yes for you, say yes, but then you can have that conversation that day. Hey, I'm so curious. Like I'm excited to embark on this next part of our chapter together. But I'm so curious, like what does a committed relationship look like to you? Are there things that we want to work towards together? Are there things that you think will change naturally? And it doesn't have to be like you get every single answer there. It's a question designed to get the wheels turning. So if somebody's like, well, yeah, now that we're like together, we'll probably spend a little bit less time going out super late at night on, if the other person's not there, or just things like the more you iron out kinks in advance, the less explosive issues you're going to have later on, or big challenges you're going to face later on. Like whatever is not intentional will usually come up as an obstacle later that you learn the hard way. So just getting some of these early things out of the way, getting clear, being intentional, they can be like made into light conversations. Like, hey, are there any like things that we're going to work towards now changing together? Now that we're on this new path, like it can be something like that. It doesn't have to be super serious, but it's definitely worthwhile having those dialogues for sure.
What popped in my head was sort of the FA perspective of this. Would they feel sort of nervous and worried about telling their partner, hey, like, this is the way things are now? Like, I noticed, you're let's say you're a male, like, oh, your female best friend has sleepovers at your house, or like you go out with this group of females, this time or whatever. As an FA, I could see them being nervous or gun shy about being like, okay, hey, once we go in a relationship, like those sleepovers, they got to stop. Or like you hanging out with your ex all the time, like that's gonna have to be more like maybe all three of us hang out once in a while, or like, do you know what I mean? So like as an FA, would it be hard to identify, and I don't want to say what's allowed, like, or what's allowed, but you sort of do want to tell the person what you sort of expect to be allowed. Like you can't just up and go away to Vegas with the boys for the weekend. Like there's going to be sort of a certain level of rules. And I was just wondering, from an FA perspective, would that be hard to sort of lay down your rules and expectations, or would an FA sort of hold back and not want to like appear like weak or needy or like demanding?
So often, it's such a good question. So often FAs will hold back because they don't want to appear like weak or needy or demanding. Exactly like you said. Sometimes APs will do the same, but it will always come out in different ways. Like it's just like an explosive argument waiting to happen. And I think that there's things, right? Like if and that's where each person has to be really individuated in their approach. Like I know for me, for example, when I was a fearful avoidant, and it probably wouldn't have changed too much since becoming secure years ago, but like for me, like if somebody's having sleepovers with their best friend, their female best friend, like I just wouldn't be in a relationship with somebody doing that, quite honestly. Like if that was still happening, I probably wouldn't say yes to a committed relationship. Like to me, like having a female best friend, cool. Like if that's somebody who's like before the relationship, before I knew you, I would never want to like take that away from somebody. Would I want, if I saw a big future with somebody, to feel like that female best friend was somebody I also knew and could also get along with, and there was transparency around, yes, that would definitely be like a healthy thing that would make me feel good about the situation. Would I be okay with like sleepovers in that kind of situation in a committed relationship? No, like that would just be a non-negotiable, like a boundary. So, but that's going to be different for each person. Some people have an aversion to like even somebody having a best friend that they could have a thing with. Some people too, like, and this probably won't be popular opinion, but like, my husband doesn't stay in touch with any of his exes at all. Like he's very not like that. But if like that's something where I would have a little bit of a room for, like if he was like, yeah, I dated somebody years ago, and sometimes they say happy birthday or something like that, or we have mutual friends and I see them every so often. I would never be like, don't go to the gathering where you have mutual friends. Like I would actually have a lot of grace for that. But I think there's a big difference between being friendly with somebody who is your ex that you may still have some sort of like indirect connection with if it's a friend group versus being active friends with your ex. In that case, there would need to be really good reasons for why. It's pretty specific boundaries. Each person's going to be different. That has to be a very individuated approach. And I think that that's such an important thing, like that you raised, is like those details will matter. And whatever doesn't come out in a healthy way ahead of time will come out in a not unhealthy way later on. So get the conversations out of the way. If there's things that feel unresolved before a commitment that you're like, wait, I can't have a committed relationship with this situation happening, then have those discussions. Because again, a lot of those things may even fall in like the non-negotiable category that we talked about earlier. But those things that will really matter are going to be things that save you big disagreements that could really cause a lot of harm to the relationship later on.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, the ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, ex-partner debate. I see everyone on different sides of the spectrum there, and it's understandable. My opinion is like, if it's that important to the person, let's meet. Like, let's meet this other person. And if I get a good feeling and a good vibe, and I'm like, I know this there's nothing going on there. They're just literally just, really tight, good friends, then cool. But if I were to feel like a little weird or uncomfortable, I need to tell my partner, I'm not really feeling comfortable about this. Like, it's not really something I think that'll work for me. And generally, like, if your partner's not good with it, I think you have to obviously side with your partner and be like, hey, I'm not comfortable with it. And then move on. But if I think your partner should at least give a chance to gauge the relationship and see where it's at. Because there's been times where I've heard about an ex that was still in touch with my current partner. And then I met them and I'm like, zero worries, zero insecurity about this person. Like, I could see it's so platonic, and like anything they had was like long gone and a long time ago. But also I feel like my radar would be good if the guy was like sneaky and I felt like he's acting like weird or sketchy or shady, then I'd be like, no, I don't really like you hanging out with this guy.
Yeah, there's so many nuances to that. Like, were they, and like, just for people listening, right? Like, was this your ex 3 months ago, or was this your ex 12 years ago? Was this your ex that you had a mutual breakup with because you just kind of lost feelings and realized you weren't a good fit? Or was it somebody you were deeply, passionately in love with, and then one of you cheated and then spent years trying to figure it out, and you were always on and off throughout your history? I mean, like, there's so many parts to it that can be so nuanced, and all those still will make a difference. Like, if it was somebody that was your really good friend growing up, then you dated, then they became your ex, you realized you weren't compatible, but you still wanted to salvage the friendship. And then that person, these are the other features, right? Like, do you meet the ex? Do you feel comfortable? Is the ex actually really kind to you and inclusive of you? Is your partner talking to their ex every day, texting all day, and then every night on the phone? Or is your partner like having a catch up with their ex like once a month in a group of people? I mean, like, so many of these nuances will matter, but that's why this has to be a really individuated process. And like, those things ahead of time need to be discussions, because if you pretend you're okay with things and you're not, then eventually it's just going to come out in a not so healthy way. We could do the whole podcast just about that.
I know. I was thinking the wheels are turning. I'm like, we could talk about this for an hour easily. Okay, question 2 for the other person. Are there any past patterns that may be repeated? So you do want to get a sense. You want to get a sense of your own past patterns and try to overcome and grow and evolve. But you also want to know your partner's like past patterns as well. Like, are there situations in relationships that seem to always happen over and over and over? Maybe infidelities happen in like every relationship they've had. You want to find out basically, like, did you learn? Did you grow? Like, what are the chances of this exact same thing happening again? And ask, what do you feel you've uncovered or healed about yourself since that situation happened? And if you can see that there was no growth, there was no accountability. I think accountability is huge. If it's just them always saying, like, I think you should run away from someone who's always saying like, oh, that ex, she was crazy, she was nuts. My ex before that, she was toxic, she was crazy. This is somebody who will never point the finger at themselves or look at their sort of, their basically hand in why the relationship didn't go well. So you want to see someone who identifies, what went wrong, or what are some of the patterns that occurred in the past, and B, what they've learned from it, and I guess C, how they know that next time when the situation comes up again, or they feel it coming up again, and they have like tools and skills and knowledge of how to not let that happen again. So I think that's a huge one, actually, to find out those sort of patterns.
Huge. And I think you described that pretty much perfectly. But really having that accountability, that insight, and then really making sure if you're on the receiving end of that, if you are looking for somebody, maybe they had some past not so great patterns, but you see that they're insightful about them. You see that they're doing things, or they're talking about doing things to change them, just vetting by their actions and not their words. Not like, oh yeah, I would like to grow through these. Oh, I'd like to be this, different in this way next time. Are they actively doing things that will make them different? And just making sure that you're vetting by their actions will be huge. So let's go into the next one.
100%. Yeah, for sure. These are great. What are the biggest triggers? So you wanna find out ahead of time, like, what are some of this person's big sore spots, big triggers, big wounds, just so you can sort of like be a little more sensitive and a little more aware of the areas that trigger them. It can be pretty upsetting if someone doesn't know your triggers and they keep triggering you over and over and over. It would be up to you to let them know, like, hey, this is a sore spot for me. But if you're sort of the type who doesn't want to like say anything, or ashamed, or worried that you're going to come off as this, that, or the other, it's good to identify while things are like good and copacetic. That's the time to say, hey, like, just to let you know, like, I don't know, I get really bothered when somebody, I can't think of anything right now. What's just like,
no, like I get really bothered when people aren't present. If somebody's not present with me, when we're on a date and your phone is out, whatever it is, like those things, getting them out in advance is huge. And then what do you need instead? Because sometimes if you just say, oh, it triggers me when people are inconsistent. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? What do you want to happen instead? Make sure you're communicating it in a constructive way. I think there's so often that we communicate constructively and destructively. And destructive is like, gosh, I hate when people are A, B, C. Okay, but then what do you want to happen instead? If you're like, oh, I struggle when people are inconsistent in relationships. Consistency really matters to me. Maybe somebody's anxiously attached, and consistency looks like, let's have a daily touch base. If we're dating, we're in a relationship, we make sure we at least like have a nice text exchange or talk on the phone every day, even when things are busy, if for 15 minutes, whatever it is for you. Remember, this is a very individuated process. Making sure that you've made that clear and apparent about what you do want instead of just the thing triggering you will allow for you guys to avoid each other's triggers and know what to do in advance. And again, we'll just save so much headache that is you having to learn that the hard way when you're triggered, and then trying to figure out what to do in real time when you're feeling upset or frustrated or confused.
Exactly. The quick example, the lateness. So like, oh, it triggers me if you're going to be late. Well, if you're dating someone who like kind of is a little apt to be late for things, well, what's the solution? Well, hey, if you could just write me a message and say, hey, I'm going to be about 20 minutes late. Perfect. I'm already at the coffee shop. I can go to the library quickly and return that book. I can pull out my laptop and send some emails. If you send a message and I know you're going to be 20 minutes late, then I can, do whatever I want with my time and not just sit there and stew or, feel, oh, I'm being disrespected. So again, it's identifying the trigger and then what would be a healthy alternative, what would work for both of you.
100%.
Okay. Number 4, just at the end, what important needs they need met. So when you're in a relationship, what needs do you need met? What are things really important to you that you need a partner to help you meet those needs? You just want to identify those like straight up beforehand, so it's not a big surprise when somebody's like laying all this stuff on you where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, like now we're in a relationship and they're they're always, I don't know, what's something, I'm having trouble coming up with examples today.
Well, it
Something like,
needs to be like, hey, somebody needs appreciation or reassurance, right? And so maybe somebody's anxious and they're making a huge effort and they just want to know from their partner that the partner notices their effort, or that hey, I have to cancel plans tonight, but I really can't wait to see you next time. Let's make plans for Saturday. Like maybe it's a certainty or a reassurance, like, but being able to have those conversations and know those things in advance, not only is going to prevent conflict and arguments, but it's going to make you each feel loved in the way that you need. Because we all tend to love from our perception. We tend to like, oh, if I would, really need a lot of growth in a relationship, I'm going to constantly bring growth to my partner, constantly want to do growth activities together.
yeah,
Maybe my partner also likes stability and doesn't want to always be pushing towards growth. Can I be mindful of that? Can I be considerate of like, routine oriented things we can do together as well, instead of always trying to do something that's growing? So just being able to know those things in advance helps you consider each other better, helps you love each other in the way that you each need, and will just overall bring a lot more harmony to the relationship.
exactly. I think the one big and obvious one would be like if somebody needs a lot of attention, they're like in a relationship. I need someone to be texting with me like throughout the day, telephone calls, et cetera, et cetera. You need to gauge like, am I going to be able to deliver on that? Is that going to be something actually doable for me? Or is that going to be like, whoa, like, is this really going to sort of push you away? Especially if you're an avoidant, you're like, oh my gosh, like this person told me how much they need me to text and I agreed to it, but now I'm, feel like I'm drowning. So at least you want to have the conversation again. The person saying, when I'm in a relationship, I need you to text X amount of times. You can say, that's a little much for me. Can we, do that maybe half the amount and work through it that way? And if that's something the other person agrees to, then that's great. Exactly.
So, Mike, should we dive into number 5 here?
Yeah, the last one you want to talk about with the other person is to sort of ensure your long-term plan. You want to know sort of what you want to let them know what you're looking for, ideally in a relationship for your sort of longer-term plan, not just, hey, let's date and get together and see what happens. Like you have to let the other person know how you're dating intentionally at this moment. And it could be in any way, shape, or form. If you're looking for casual, you let them know my intention. I'm looking for more of a casual thing. If you're looking for, hey, I'm looking for a long-term committed relationship, after maybe a year or two moving in with someone, potentially having a family.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to have those conversations early, because so often I would have clients who just didn't. And they would be like, okay, like let's, just see how things unfold. And I think it's the importance of knowing what you're looking for long term and do your lifestyles align. Like I would see people who, for example, would be like, oh, we're gonna date, but I don't want to live in the same country in the next 2 years. I'm planning on moving.
Yeah.
And somebody else going, well, in the next 2 years, I'm planning on staying. And I also I'm not okay with doing a long distance relationship. And so it doesn't have to be like you map out every single detail of your life with somebody, especially early on, because that's just not realistic. It's also a little bit too much of trying to control the outcome and the dynamic. But I think there have to be conversations about like your long-term mission goals. Like if somebody's more career oriented, if somebody's more, wants comfort and security of things being the same, if somebody loves to travel, if somebody, you're just being able to say like, hey, what are we looking for in the future? And do those two paths that we each have, the intentions behind, overlap? Do they cross over? What are our morals and values here? Do they align in this kind of way? And are the same things important to us? In the next 5 to 10 years, do you want a family? Or in the next 5 to 10 years, do you want, are you somebody who is going to really be there for your own family? And are we okay with that? Like there just has to be that deeper idea of who somebody is and what they're looking for in that longer term pass. And I think in doing that, it then allows the other person who's hearing, or at least both people for each other, to be really clear on like, can this really work in the long term? Or is this just something that's more designed to be for like a season of life?
Yeah. The one that popped in my head that you mentioned was the location thing. So with family, some people are very family oriented and they want to live in the same area. They might be close with their brothers and sisters, with their parents, whatnot. And they're just like, I won't even entertain like leaving the town that I'm in. I have to be by my family. Whereas myself, me and my family, we're close and we love each other, but we're kind of scattered location wise. And that's fine with me. Like I like to live in different places and explore and see the world. But if somebody's not like that, like they have to honor that. And then I have to honor that I probably can't stay in the same place for years and years and years, depending on what's going on at the time. But in general, like if you know you're that kind of person and then you sacrifice that for someone, like you're going to build resentment. You're eventually going to get upset and it's going to come out. Like that pull is not just going to go away. Like you sort of knew that about yourself, but you chose to ignore it when, early on is when you should be really intentional and letting people know, hey, this is what I know I'm going to need in my life. Let's hear what you know that you're going to need in your life. Doesn't have to be 10 out of 10, but the bigger ones do have to line up. Otherwise, it's just going to be big problems for sure.
Yeah, and then you can sort of position who that person like is in your life, how they belong in your life going forward. Are they going to be their first season of life? Or are they somebody you're really looking towards the future with? And I think that then enables a person to make more clear long-term decisions based on like getting that information early and knowing where each person stands.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
awesome stuff. Such a fun episode. If you are listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms, you can also watch the full video version of this on YouTube. And if you're listening to us on YouTube and watching us on YouTube, you can listen and follow along on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. I'll put a link to Mike's social media down below. And also, if you haven't already, you can check out one of the cool 14-day free trials that we have going on right now. It's something we do once a year, sometimes twice a year. And it's something we're offering right now for free access to PDS just for a limited time. Thanks everybody so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth, and thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.